Once you have completed your photo shoot and also gathered all of your other resources, I have taken all these pictures of myself throwing a mask, and I also needed someone with a medical condition, so I have some seniors walking here, and then I also have some children with oxygen masks and inhalers. And I kind of identify the ones I want to use and put them back in my camera roll. So I have three of my best pictures of me, and then I have this gentleman, and I have this little boy. I've kind of cropped two images together to make it work. Just to show you, this is kind of my goal here for today. I want to basically identify my text. I want to edit me or this figure down to be very high contrast, as well as the boy. So I'm going to just start with my local Photos app. We're going to hit edit, and to start off, I'm just going to make this black and white. I like this Noir option because it's very high contrast, which is part of the goal. For a stencil, you're going to lose a lot of the detail, and that's completely fine. You want to simplify the features down so that they're still recognizable, but they become simple shapes. So I don't need to see like eyelashes and pupils of this face, but I do want to recognize, oh, it's a human head with a hat. There's nose and lips on it still. Okay, so keep that in mind as you do your edits. I'm going to increase my contrast next. So you can see the eye, you're starting to lose the detail, but you can still recognize it's a face. Lower brightness a little bit. I'm going to increase definition and sharpness. All right, that's looking good. I'm going to do the same thing for the little boy. And you will have to come back and re-edit it. So before doing any of these edits, I should have prefaced this. You want to hit this symbol up here that looks like a rectangle with an arrow and hit duplicate. That way you have a separate copy and you can always come back in and redo this. Because you will have to do this, you'll have to kind of go back and forth to figure out what's going to work for this stencil. Alright, now that I have my two images edited and make them black and white high contrast, I'm going to bring them into my first application. The first app we're going to use to start creating our stencil is called it's the first app we're going to use is called Imma Engine right here. So if you don't have this installed yet, you can find this on the self-service app. We're going to hit import photo, and let's start with me. So once you have it cropped, I'm just going to go ahead and hit go. All right, and then you have all these different kind of artistic effects here along the bottom. I'm going to use this one called ink. Now remember, the goal is to create a stencil. So all of this area that's kind of like this dark brown color, that's going to be cut out of paper. The white is going to be the remaining paper that's not affected. So you want to keep those white areas nice and solid so it can keep the integrity of the stencil. So we'll have to do a little bit of touching and finagling at the end here, but for now we're going to kind of play with these scroll bars. The detail, obviously I don't want to lose all the detail. I want it to be a recognizable human. And then threshold, I'm going to increase a little bit more. And then freckles is kind of like texture or detail. But go back and forth. Any white areas that are just by itself called an island, we are going to have to connect manually. So look here at the arm. These little white shapes would be considered islands. I'm going to have to come in and erase those manually. So if you can eliminate some of that now, just by changing these sliders around to try to get the right resolution, that would be best. All right, this is looking pretty good. There's going to be some editing I have to do. I want to also get rid of the background. So I'm going to hit Editor at the top center. And now I can come in with the eraser and start to erase. Here's the size at the bottom. You can scroll left and right. And I can erase this. Now before I do this, notice at the bottom right, there's layers. I don't want this pink color in the background. We can just hit the eyedropper, or you can select it and hit the trash can, and it totally gets rid of it. Then these two selectors at the top left, the black selector arrow will allow you to select certain shapes and just hit the trash can and make them go away. So some of the bigger shapes, like that wall panel, I can just select and delete. But some of these smaller shapes, it's going to be faster just to use your eraser tool. So I'm going to come in and start to get rid of all these lines. Once you've removed all of your background, it's time to come in and start editing some of the shapes. So what I'm going to do is make sure that this mask and where my hand connects actually looks like a hand in a mask. So if I need to edit my fingers, I'll just come in and kind of round those over. Where the mask and my hand connected, it started getting a little weird looking with the filter. Now I'm going to come back in with a paintbrush and actually start to draw back in those strings for the mask. So I'll just loop these together. And put another loop on the other end. If there's any features in the face that you think look a little awkward, you can come in and start to edit those too. So right here under the eye, I can fix that. If this area right here doesn't add anything to the composition, I can remove it. If I want to add some details under the nose or make it look like my nose is less upturned, I can just kind of come in and retrace that shape a little bit. Or maybe I want to pull out some of the shadow under my eye. I can do that as well. This is when it's handy to have the reference image right in your photos still, so you can come back and forth between the two. So if I come to my Photos app, I can reference the original image and start to kind of fill in the missing information. Now the most important part is making sure there are no islands within my shape. So all these white areas need to be one continuous shape. If I have a white area that's just floating in the middle here, I need to modify that, because if that's the case, it's just going to fall through my stencil and be lost anyway. So two options. Some of the detail here in the sleeve I really like. So I want to make sure that this stays. What I'll do is take an eraser and basically pull out these shapes so I have to become part of this bigger one, and I can connect to here. And maybe just connect these and pull it back up over. So that you imagine this white area as one poster board, these fingers coming in, they'll be a little fragile, so you just want to make sure there's enough connecting it where they're not going to fall through. And maybe, connecting right here. And you can keep those details by just connecting some of these shapes. Now, if you come to an area where, let's say there's no great way to connect them, instead, just cover them up. Basically, just paint over them if there's really no good way to keep them. All you should see is just areas of this darker value as little islands within the white overall. So you need to come through, look over everything, and start to really modify all these shapes. So I'm going to cover up all of these. I really like this texture in the shirt. However, it can be extremely simplified. So coming in here, I can start to connect these. I'm going to try to keep that linear path to make it look like fabric. So now if I connect this right here, this brown area in the middle, that is now an island inside the white. However, this fabric down here, this is super fragile. So right around here, if that was the only piece of paper connecting all of this interior detail, that would obviously break or rip. So instead, I'm just going to connect it here. And look for other areas that I can naturally just connect all the whites. Okay, so my drawing is still extremely complicated. There's way too much detail. I need to simplify this down. A lot of these little lines I can just combine by coming into my layers and just kind of simplifying them down into one large area. You still want it to look realistic, so if you know how the folds will actually look if they're simplified, you can kind of go in the same direction as most of those lines were created originally. But I'm also looking at areas like this long stretch of white here. I want to take some of that out because that's just going to be a really large white strip coming into my negative space of my stencil, and that's probably going to tear, or there's going to be overspray underneath it, and it's not going to look that great. So this will take some experience and just trying to figure things out and the best way to do it. But I say go simple. So if there's a lot of these little stripes here, I'm going to simplify those even further. Take out some of this, pull together some of these strips, and simplifying these curves. That's an island, so that can't be. So I'm going to combine it with the other one. And let's just make it one large stripe. Like so. All of this I don't think is adding anything to the model, so instead of keeping it, I'm just going to come in and paint it out. I might leave a little bit coming in. But all these little shapes in between, I don't think are going to add anything to this. I don't really like what's going on here with the kneecap, so I'm going to paint these shapes out. There's a lot going on in the shoes, so again, simplifying this down. I like to see some of the detail, but if you have these really tiny areas, they probably won't translate into the stencils, so you may as well simplify them. Make sure there's no islands, and if there's areas where you can easily connect the white, go ahead and do so. Okay, let's call this done for now. I can come back in and modify it. So what you do once you have this done is we are going to select it all. So I'm going to grab the selection tool. And you can see these little areas over here. They're not supposed to be there, so let me just fix that. I'll just erase them. Let's double check to make sure I have everything. Good. So I am going to now copy them. By exporting them into a separate app. Let's start that over. Once you have your stencil completely edited the way you want, all right, you've looked over everything, you've made sure there's no islands, you simplified all the patterns. Just again, this is way too detailed up in the shoulder, so I would want to get rid of all of those wrinkles by just either coloring them in black, or actually that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to color them in black, but for time's sake, let's go ahead and take this into the next app. So I want an SVG file. I hit this little arrow, share. I want an SVG, and I'm going to say open in, and I want to open it into my Vectornator app. It creates a new document right away. All right, so I can open this here, and it's right there, it's ready to go. It looks like I have a couple different layers that I need to merge, but we'll deal with that by just selecting everything and hitting the merge button. Boom. So now all those shapes are just one simple shape, and I could reverse the fill if I wanted to and see the actual laser cut path. But first, I need to put this into one document. So I'm going to hit the X, and we're going to create a new document, custom size. We are going to make this 18 wide by 10 tall. And I want it to be in inches, not points, so make sure inches is units selected. Then hit done. And hit create. You'll have a blank document, and this is the size that you'll have access to in the laser cutter. So we can't go too much bigger than this, or else we'd have to create separate stencils. So what we're going to do is work within this size frame, and I'm going to come back to my other document by hitting X. I'm going to come into it, and I'm just going to select everything at the top here. I can copy it. Then I can come back into my other document I just created and paste it. Now I can scale it. And this is where I'm going to place my other images and graphics. So if I have text, I'll place that here. If I have that small boy, I'll do the exact same thing that I did for the figure and start to lay out everything on this document. From there, I'll show you the next step, and we'll get this ready for the laser cutter.